Thank you so much to you all for being here. It's been quite an intense day, a super poetic day. But maybe we can start. I mean, I know this is not traditional, but maybe we can start by thanking the conveners of this event now, because it's been really incredible. I just want to. So that's, of course, Cyan, Chen, Mengfan, Harriet, everybody at the AA, but also all of the guests that have joined today. Like I said, it's been a long and intense day, so I really thank you for being here. I made pages and pages and pages of notes that I'm not going to use, I guess. I'm just going to try and go intuitively. But also, what do we have, until 7?
Yeah.
So I also want to hold some time for you all to ask questions, as you are really the kind of recipients of the day. I suppose, and I will confess, I'm not involved in filmmaking at all. No, I teach largely history of architecture, which is to say stories of architecture, and in that sense, there is a kind of kinship. Last year, I was involved for the first time in producing a film with an architect, and there were reasons for that. There were reasons to do with storytelling, with myth-making, with all kinds of things that have been discussed today. But I am new to the field of ethnographic filmmaking, so I'm hoping that I'm going to be asking some of the basic questions and then leave you also time to ask some questions to our practitioners. I had kind of 3 fields. So we are speaking in a school of architecture where there are genuinely hundreds, possibly even thousands of students learning how to supposedly make the world. And not so many in the room today. So I did want to think about why that might be, the crossovers and overlaps with architecture, the kind of alliances or not that you might have found in your work speaking to the panel. But also this notion of product versus purpose. I often find this in my teaching of architecture, that there's an overwhelming, let's say, pressure to be productive, to produce X number of drawings, and eventually to produce an output. And listening to the practitioners here today, there's definitely a spectrum of, let's say, concern regarding the output of the product and the motivation, sometimes completely intuitive, sometimes less intuitive, with regards to purpose. So in a very open way, I just wanted to go around and get your thoughts on the notion of product or productivity versus purpose, and how let's say, how loud these concerns are for you, how you locate them also. Because personally, growing up in, let's say, the UK architecture school realm, I'm still laboring under, oh God, I'm not productive enough. But I'm trying to leaven that. I'm trying to kind of balance that with a sense of, well, I know what my purpose is. So I wonder if I can bring that to the panel as well. And maybe we can just swing round. Do you mind if we start with you guys? And not to treat you as an entity, you all have very different purposes, perhaps, and very different practices, the 3 of you. And maybe we can go around. Is that okay?
During the last 2 weeks in this school, I do feel I'm not productive at all.
Architecture school makes you feel that way. Don't listen.
I think more important for me is to find the motivation again and again, or back to the motivation and aspiration. And because sometimes it could be a fake motivation. And so I feel in this whole process, it's all about to asking this question, and until it become really authentic, or you can grasp in your hand this kind of feeling. Yeah, generally in my creation.
I know what you mean. This needs to be productive. Being an architect, and you have to meet all the deadlines and produce enough drawings and make sure the quality is good enough that whatever you build matches what you imagine. But I think the whole field work we've been doing in the village is an attempt to drive away from that, which is very hard in the beginning because we all say we try to not to set any goals or, but you could spend like days just wonder without doing anything. And at some point you do get stressed out, like, why are you doing it? But I think the whole month, when I first step into the field, is like that. But if you're just allowing that to happen, at some point you will find the purpose. I think it's just to really trying to believe it. That will give you the productivity that's required, but in a quite slow pace.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish there were more students in the room because I would like for them to hear that productivity isn't necessarily the measure. And indeed, things that you can measure are sometimes not to be trusted. I feel like some of the value in the films that we've seen are not necessarily measurable or tangible outputs. But maybe I should bring that question also to you, Francesco, and to some of the others as well. I mean, for example, you were talking about the need to kind of frame your filming in a particular way, thinking about it's going to be shown in a gallery, it's going to be shown in... So I suppose, how do you balance your sense of purpose? Now, also for the CCA, thinking about how to expand the conversation around architecture to a broader public, and then to what extent that constrains or defines your product, what you actually produce and what you put out there. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship? Either of you.
I don't know.
Well, I think I really like this notion of purpose, because as an artist, I have found myself wondering many times how an artist can be of service. And it's a tricky question because I think as an artist, I need to engage in a constant renovation of a belief in subjectivity and imagination, and believe that they are important, even though when the world around me is not necessarily going into that direction. And so for me, fiction is a very important tool in that sense. The fact of being able to envision something that existed before or can exist or could be, and in the worse or better ways. Mm-hmm. So I guess that it's an ongoing process of believing that fiction has a purpose and that it helps us bring a sense of togetherness, for better or worse, and we definitely need it. Mm-hmm.
What about you, Francesco?
Yeah, no, I think you're touching a key point, Shumi, here. I'm talking from the perspective of, exhibition making practices and how much we need this huge amount of exhibitions or things happening and going on. And it's funny, at the entrance of the CCA, there is actually a quote by Gordon Matta-Clark, who is one of the artists we have in our collection, which says, I don't know if I'm kind of following by art exactly, the words in the quotes, but says, what we have to offer you here is actually a lot of confusion driven by a strong sense of purpose. And then the previous director of the institution decided to print it big and put it in front of the entrance of the office corridor. So everyone, who works at the CCA reads this statement every morning. And I feel everyone, might also it's also an open, I would say, kind of a type of statement. Yeah. But what speaks to me in the sense that at the CCA, or at least, in this sort of a environment of within which we work, there is a sort of an agenda of themes. There are several lines of investigations that we try to kind of explore. But the product in itself, let's use this word, is actually, and luckily for my interpretation of what it means being a curator today, it's pretty open. So we could develop, a theme through a book or through the presentation of a film, through a cinematographic missions, which is an experiment, or a set of exhibitions. And the CCA really thinks as a researcher, even though from outside sometimes it's maybe something you don't grasp, and you think, okay, there is a calendar of projects, like there is an institutional schedule, it's a museum with the fall and spring exhibitions, but actually the way it operates is really following this sense of purpose and allowing for the confusion Mata Clark is mentioning as the status of constant dialogue that we have internally. So I can say that I'm happy to be within such a confusion.
Yeah, please go ahead, Erin.
I was also kind of thinking throughout the whole symposium, like, what's our work's relation to architecture? Why are we here in the symposium? But I guess the word holding space resonates quite a lot in our work at Delfina Foundation. I forgot to mention to those who are not familiar with us that we are the biggest residency space for artists and curators here in the UK. So our ethos is really about process-based, about incubating artists, about not giving them any requirements at the end of the residency, really giving them 3 months or 6 months of fully funded time and love, unconditional love, to do whatever they want. And every time when we welcome those artists, researchers, curators, for the first day, we say, if we understand that you are creative, so even if you are not actively working on something, you just go and experience the world. You talk to people from different cultures here in London. Your mind is still probably working in the background. So really here, you don't have to think about productivity. You don't have to think about an exhibition or something that you have to achieve. And that kind of space, I think, for all kinds of creatives, not just artists, like for architects, to give them the kind of experimenting ground is important.
It is such a hard state of mind to maintain, being in an indeterminate space. And I've spoken with you guys on just how you've navigated and kind of negotiated that, especially when you're doing field work. But it makes me think of some of the things that you were saying. I mean, first of all, I was agreeing in my mind that, we're very unused to this freedom. When I see my students, architecture students, embarking on art projects, I see them trying to structure it in a way that, has something that is comprehensible. So it takes a lot of courage to follow intuitive processes. And maybe the reason I was thinking of you is because you were speaking quite a lot about the value of things that I think are unmeasurable, right? The value of things that are perhaps witnessed in a non-human sense, or things that are that gain value in what they convene, what they commune, I think, as you were saying. Do you think you could speak to this kind of quality of the unmeasurable that seems to be quite important in guiding your works?
Okay, maybe two strands. Two threads for answering this question. I think one is a question of what is the ethics of inquiry that I believe in with my whole body. And I think this is around what is the freedom to inquire, right? The other way to engage in this conversation is as someone who is a teacher and sometimes a curator, so who facilitates the creative endeavors of others. And maybe I'll talk about this in the context of teaching in an academic institution, so facilitating the creative endeavors of artists and creatives. So the question is always, why do this project in an academic context where you could be doing this project as your artistic practice? And I think here the the question that I have a lot with my students, particularly in the initial stages of them initiating their artistic research PhD, is that how you are participating in your field is actually you are experimenting with, playing with, and making a proposition about how you do this thing. So I try to break down this term methodology and method into the conversation that you offer is, this is how I try. And I think here there is a balance between freedom of inquiry and participating in a conversation framed by certain collective anxieties, certain endeavors to ask a question. And I guess here, this is where the issue of purpose comes in. So I think participating in a conversation about method, coming at it with your whole process and your whole body is absolutely essential. And that is the reason why you do something creative in an academic context. And here, method is not something you pull off the shelf. It's not something you apply. It's how are you trying to do something?
Beautiful answer. Steve, I don't know if you have anything to reflect in terms of... I know, sorry. But
Sorry, I haven't talked about my work today, but...
yeah, you'll need the microphone.
I have to hold this, all right. Okay, I haven't really talked about my work today, but a lot of what the others have said, it sort of speak to me. I'm sort of coming from a background as being a teacher for a long time. I've moved over more to a kind of curatorial space. So, you know, what I'm hearing is about it being an incubator. And I get back to the question, I think really where I'm at now, I mean, I have my own practice, I do my own thing in my own time, but really the main focus is that I'm not productive on purpose. And the reason for that is because it's pulling together, sort of making other people's productions speak to each other and thinking about how they can make an intervention, how they can push something or open a door. And for me, I live for discovery. You know, I want to see how those new connections are made, and you know what people like. What are the transversal alliances that I didn't expect? You know, and if I can make that happen, if I can see something then that's really what sort of I think drives me.
And go ahead, please.
Sorry, I wanted to add something about the space for the others. I feel because this is something like that we've been discussing many times, like creating the conditions to allow. It's a project in itself, which has, of course, a level of complexities which are huge. Let's say, well, it's a project in itself. How do you allow? Seems like easy sometimes to say, but I think it's I think it's one of the most urgent thing we should be discussing in institutions, like in different formats and different levels, from the collection to the production of the software, the minimal kind of intervention in the space. So, and it's a very kind of a complicated issue, but I think it's one of the urgent ones, I feel. Yeah.
Again, I'm kind of mindful of time. Do I have time to ask another question before I throw open? And again, speaking of time, have your questions ready. So I'll take about 8 to 10 minutes, but then hopefully we can have your time. So continuing on with thinking about, well, method, how we go about doing things. And I appreciate your comment, May, that method isn't something that you can pluck from the shelf and apply to a situation, that it is something that perhaps needs to be forged or found. And also thinking about at least one parallel between the method or the process of making architecture and the process of making films is that they are both inevitably collaborative events. Inevitably, you're seeking permission and collaboration and playtime with others. So I guess I had questions about notions of subjectivity, like how you treat or find or identify your subject. We spoke a few times during the day about for example, tropes of the face-to-face interview or following a subject from the back or whatnot. So I just wanted to pick up again on those notions of who or what is the subject. And then, again, common to architecture, this notion of authorship with film. May, again, I appreciated your comment about, well, if we're talking about other forces, perhaps spirits, perhaps ghosts, those also become co-authors of the work. So, to crystallize the question, how do you approach defining what is your subject in your work? To anybody who would like to pick that up. Unless you want me to pick you. Take a second.
That's the teacher.
Yeah, a little bit.
Maybe I can jump in.
Yeah, come on, Cyan. Thank you.
I think for us, I guess in our work, we kind of identify or share something with the people we work with through how we are doing it. So in a way, it goes back to the earlier conversation about the method, about the how. Because as I was trying to explain earlier in the morning that we start the project as a really classic architectural way, and we have clear defined objectives and all that. And as time goes on, we start to letting go all of that. So it's a change of method, but we adopt that way of working. We learned it from the people we are working with. So I guess in this way, in this how, we identify something that's shared maybe between something, maybe not shared as we learn from them. I guess that's a more accurate way to put
Something
it.
absorbed maybe from the context, yeah? What about you all? Can you talk about how subject comes into it, or does it?
I think I was stumbling upon what you said about filmmaking being inherently collaborative, because I think that historically, I'm not sure that is true. I think that filmmaking as a form or cinema is, or what I have come to notice is that it may be more extractive than collaborative, and that the very idea that there is a subject already implies that the one who's filming the subject is like, a monarch, or, has like a power, an authority position. So I guess that's one thing that I have been interested in, is how to move those lines of a structure of power, and perhaps trying to include within the production process a reflection about this pyramid that cinema historically has built, and that you see in commercial cinema all the time. On top of the pyramid is the person holding the financial capital, the producer holding all the rights. So how can you shift these lines and in a certain way engage in a process of reception, where there is also the possibility that a subject or a theme or a person can find you or can respond back. So it's a lot about, I resonate with the fact of holding space, because you need to build a certain conditions for perception where listening is going to happen. And that is not necessarily a given. So,
yeah, I'm really glad you picked up on this, the sort of extractive umbrella that hangs over, even if we all know kind of mythologies of people fearing the camera because it takes something from you. And so this practice that you have in wanting to shift exactly who's taking what from whom, and how something is being, actually being produced from other geometries other than that pyramid is really useful. May, do you want to speak to who forms what?
Maybe I'll pick up on your point. It's something to do with the relationship between agency and institution, maybe not so much a subject, but a theme of preoccupation, or what I feel to be an sort of essential topic to engage with all the time, is this question of institutions as we find it, what needs undoing, but also creative practice as practices of institution building. And I suppose it very much ties into your question. This may, this is not even maybe, I think obviously it's also a factor of aging. As I age, I become more preoccupied with this question, right? How does one build institutions? How does one operate within an existing institutional structure, which is often highly chaotic, and in this century, particularly chaotic, maybe. Not institutions as we desire to find it, but maybe to make something happen at scale, institutionalization as critique and as building. Key skill to learn. Mm-hmm. Very, very difficult to learn.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, go ahead if you have more to add.
Well, just to on this kind of a topic of how institutions should be rethought or kind of considered today, in light of also what you were saying, Shumi, like why this subject or why the other, who is shaping your agenda. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we don't have a solution. As I said at the beginning, what we try to do, or what we've been trying to do, is basically to construct a sort of an organic agenda of themes where usually, I mean, in the presentation I briefly made, like, you know, two of the films have been generated one from the other in the kind of conceptual elaboration of the themes. The one on living alone and the one on happiness, they were one connected to the other. So in the sense that, you know, if the institution kind of works as a thinker, you know, you don't know what is coming next, because sometimes it's the research which is shaping your next project. But then the problem is, like, again, how do we dismantle a sort of a, you know, hierarchical sort of a system embedded in the institution? So I think that, you know, trying to kind of incorporate, you know, different perspective of, you know, authorial voices into the making of an organic kind of a tree of themes is what, you know, I think what we've been trying to do, and it's possible, not possible, I don't know. But yeah, I feel that, of course, is one of the discussion we need to have, yeah.
I just wanted to quickly respond to that. I guess within filmmaking and architecture, and also within contemporary art, I guess this question of authorship you mentioned, and also kind of the challenges of collaboration, is also quite central to a lot of the process of art making and incubating. And there's a concept I love from street dance that I quote a lot called cipher, which is not just thinking about a single performer on the stage, but really thinking about an organic circle that's formed by all the dancers together. So people take their turn to go into the center and dance, but everyone else is still part of the cipher. They're contributing their energy, their feedback, their like fingers, their voice, and they actually inspire each other. So you're not really competing against each other like in a battle. Well, actually, even a battle is about loving each other, learning from each other. But it's really kind of about learning from each other in conversation with each other. So I always talk to our artists or curators in residence about this concept. You know, sometimes people apply for this opportunity thinking, yes, I want to grab it. I want to develop my personal career, get in front of everyone else. But for us, it's a luxury to have 8 amazing people from all over the world. And for us, it's about actually also acknowledging all the different factors in art ecology, in the research resources, in everything that artists take inspirations from, and So although, yeah, you see an artist's name in the artwork, but no one makes something out of air. So
I love this. I love this image of the dance circle, and it's something that we should definitely keep in, most educational spaces, but certainly architectural ones, where perhaps support for whatever idea takes shape in the middle is something that is generative, rather than purely performative. I had a couple more questions, some to do with, this weight of representation that I mentioned when we were talking early this morning to Mosat, and also the act of translation, whether that's your works being translated into different spaces or you being the distiller, the translator of what's there. But I think I want to ask a much more stupid question, and then turn it open to you. And I'm really asking from quite a naive place with my first year students in mind. I find contemporarily, apart from, let's say, individual ambitions, as we just mentioned, but I think oftentimes people who are involved in, let's say, acts of world building, whether that's architecturally or in terms of imagination, certainly with my first year architecture students, they're very much weighted by, I think, what the architect in the last film mentioned as a kind of social strategy towards kind of planetary justice. At least I would hope that that's what a lot of architecture students are kind of working towards. And what I often find liberating about particularly fictions, particularly speculative or narrative works that don't necessarily have that informational purpose as such, is that they're somehow freed of this aspiration and therefore very many rhetorics of planetary justice and so on. And I don't know whether that's me sitting in architecture being romantic about those of us who operate as filmmakers, as art producers, as being free of these obligations of kind of having to constrain everything into making a more just or making a better world. Oftentimes in the fictions that we're seeing, the world is chaotic and cruel and beautiful at the same time. And I wonder if this obligation of progress or improvement is something that is felt both by curators who are kind of organizing this work and bringing it to the public, but also by yourselves as filmmakers or producers of artworks. Is there an obligation to make the world a better place? That was my dumb question.
Well, I feel there's an obligation to pose the questions and try to find a good question again. Sorry, I'm just saying everything is difficult tonight, but it seems like I have a lot of problems or a mountain to climb in front of me. But I think I don't know. Now I'm speaking, for myself.
Yes.
I don't know about, I don't think we have solutions most of the times, but posing the good questions means trying to find collectively or revealing the feeling of an issue or the feeling of a concern, and then collectively try to kind of tackle or at least to try to understand from the other what is a potential discussion to have. I think that looking for the questions is something I feel. Yeah.
Anyone else want to take that? I mean, did you have a kind of social purpose or a purpose towards greater justice when you were investigating rural China? Intuitively, I feel not, right? No, I feel not. And the work is all the more beautiful without having, I think, that constraint or that obligation weighing over you. It's not that we can't read another world. We can. But yeah, I'm curious to hear that wasn't a kind of weight that you feel, that a lot of generations of young designers do feel, I think.
I think the honest...
Sorry.
I feel the honest answer is, I speak for myself. When I started the project, there was that sense of sort of make the world a better place. And certainly, and it's a thing in architectural school, I definitely agree on that. It's an excellent question. I guess what's this whole process have done to me is trying to say, not like moving away from saying planetary justice or social justice or spatial justice. It still have that in the back of my mind, but focus my energy more on how about we just establish a meaningful relationship with the person around, with the next stranger you meet, or with people that are around you, but maybe you don't see them. And I think with the nearby, and then with that ripple effect, that image of thoughts, one ripple, another ripple, another ripple, and then it may lead to a more just society, or have a more harmonious relationship with others. I guess that's kind of my response to the question.
Sure. Any more to add? Do you feel any obligation to change the world for better? Is that part of, and I'm not mocking that how would we move forward if that wasn't our aspiration, right? It would be very difficult. But I just wonder about, particularly as designers have this kind of future-facing sort of obligation, I wonder how that lands with you. Yeah?
Yeah. I think there is an obligation to think and act and do always. The principle is this could be different. I think that's there. And of course, underlying that is an energy and a hope to make it all better. But I think it's a question of relating, as you say, and it's a question of somehow keeping experimenting and trying and playing in a way with the sense that this could be different. This could be different at whatever scale of exercising of agency that you have the capacity to do. So it's not starting from big and top down, and it's not about staying small, but how do we keep this open with the thought that this could be different, and this needs to be different. Yeah.
I love the rigor of, as you were describing your own practice, like constantly asking, what is cinema? What if cinema is this? Yeah. What if cinema is that? That constant rigor of kind of questioning. That was something that resonated. Also tell me, because you spoke of a lot of trauma that is carried while you're approaching your filmmaking, and I wonder how that informs this desire.
Yeah, I think also to reply partially, of course, to your question, I have the impression that I don't take survival for granted. I think that it's not about making the world a better place. It's just about living one day after the other and just wanting to be present. I don't take that for granted at all. I am also an educator, and I see my students, young people, and they struggle every day with that, with wanting to be here, to believing in a future possible. So I like the way how an artist like Cecilia Vicuña, for example, engages with the notion of survival and how it is central to her practice. It's not about being catastrophizing, or to be totally down, or building, narratives that will block us from any kind of action. But just the awareness that, it's an engagement. And it's an engagement to just be in towards the living and the continuation of the living. It's not take that for granted. I like what you were saying about the difference between purpose and production. And I was also thinking about the difference between intention and purpose. Yeah. Like yes, you can have good intentions, but how is that giving you or all of us the desire to just go through another day?
Yes. I think, again, Mo, who's had to leave, I suppose, mentioned something about in his practice wanting to locate the compassion and the wisdom that there is to transmit. I mean, that's a purpose that is hard to argue with, whether or not it has the broader aspirations of fixing the world, or whether it's simply to do with opening a channel of communication where there wasn't one. All right, well, I think that's quite enough from me. I think maybe you have some questions, or really take the opportunity to speak to these wonderful practitioners about whatever you have. There's probably a roving mic if we need one, even. Does anyone have any things that you want to ask? Or I would also love to invite you all to ask questions of each other. I mean, you've had to listen to each other all day. Perhaps you have questions that you want to ask each other with spectators. Or I have more. I can keep going.
Maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Erin.
Oh, maybe just to continue a little bit on the previous question.
Sure.
In terms of like making the world a better place, I feel like a lot of times, just speaking for me as a curator and artist I'm engaged with, I feel like it's also about asking the question, what does better mean? And also maybe shedding light on some seemingly insignificant areas of betterment. I remember there was an artwork I saw. I don't even remember the artist's name. So a lot of people use delivery apps for convenience, and he was looking at how this is seems to be a perfect virtual cycle. You just do everything online, right? And there's no interface with human being until the very last second of someone traveling all the way, maybe in the rain, to pass the food to you. But how do we treat them as human beings? And so his work was really kind of performing with delivery drivers and giving them the respect and care that they deserve. So I guess when the rest of the world is solving other seemingly more important questions, maybe artists ask these other questions.
Thank you. That's a really beautiful reflection. Are there any more? Do you guys want to ask each other things?
Maybe actually on that note, I think Erin, you are kind of alludes to Shumi, how you started by asking that question about being non-productive and on purpose. I guess you're asking like what is better. So I guess the thing for me about your initial question is then what is considered valuable? If you are talking about productivity, and then again you mentioned the measurement, so that's what is measured. So in a way, a lot of the work I guess we've shared today is trying to maybe initiate new kind of measurement, new kind of value, and then in that way, I can't say make the world better, but it's the kind of alternative, what could be different towards that goal, I suppose.
Thank you so much. I think pushing these notions of metrics and of value and even the sort of dynamics of how that value is produced seems to be something that I think we can all take with us in whatever practice we're involved in. But certainly there's been so much poetry shared around thinking about, dwelling on the planet, whether that's for humans, non-humans, and how we kind of interact each other in very subtle, but also very, very shared, even bodily ways. I loved the morning demonstration where, the simple act of participating it's really galvanizing. And if you don't participate also, that's a very strong stand. So I think there are many, many really beautiful poetic things that have been brought today. I am aware that it's almost 7:30 on a Friday night, so perhaps people want to kind of enjoy the evening and get some sustenance. If you're okay to close, then I'm also okay to close. But can you just join me again in giving a huge round of applause to everyone here and to Harriet?
I want to add that we need to thank Harriet, who's there. She is the reason we're having all of these things happening. Thank you.
Of course, there's absolutely. There are drinks in the back room. If you want to ask questions in private, that's the place to do it. So yeah, thanks again for your attention and enjoy the weekend. Thank you.